now.
This morning against former Officer Michael Slager in the death of Walter Scott. As many of you know, I think most of you are local, in South Carolina, a murder conviction carries life in prison or a sentence between life and 30 years. If Mr. Slager were to be convicted and he were sentenced somewhere between 30 and life, he would have to do every day of that sentence. There is no parole. As you also know and have heard and seen, Judge Newman, who is a circuit court judge, has been assigned to preside over this case, and he'll be handling this case from here forward. He will be the one who decides when and if there are any hearings, when and if we have a trial date, and anything really to do with this case. We don't have a trial schedule or a scheduling order as of yet, but hopefully now that an indictment has been secured, we'll be able to start that process now. Does anybody have any questions for me about any of that? I have copies of the indictment for y'all. I think I probably have enough for everybody, but you can pick those up when we're done.
So what are his exact charges?
He's charged with murder.
Just murder and
That's right. Now, in South Carolina, remember, we don't have murder in varying degrees. Although we do have murder and we have voluntary manslaughter, you'll hear other states talking about murder 1, murder 2, that sort of thing. In South Carolina, what we have is straight murder. And in this case, and in cases involving murder, what we're talking about is an unlawful killing with malice aforethought. And malice aforethought, yes, is a form of premeditation, but there's no time limit or time requirement in proving malice aforethought. It can be seconds before. As long as malice exists in the heart and mind at the time before and during the killing, the state's proven malice aforethought.
When you went to the grand jury, did you present any other possible charges, manslaughter or anything else that the grand jury could have considered?
This was the only indictment on this case that was presented today. And remember, in South Carolina, again, unlike other places, we don't have a grand jury of record. There's no court reporter there taking testimony, and in fact, the prosecutors don't present the case. The agents involved present the case. That's a little different than other states as well.
Are you prosecuting him for anything else?
Not at this time. We're going forward on the murder charge.
Are there any other cases pending before you in Charleston County?
No.
Is he going to appear before his first scheduled appearance?
I don't know. Again, that'll be up to Judge Newman to decide whether or not we have hearings that will require his presence.
So what's your reaction to this indictment?
Well, again, we felt like the facts that were presented to us by SLED warranted our seeking the indictment from the grand jury, and we'll just move forward now in preparing our case. Really, the prosecution work has just begun, and as you see, I have Chief Deputy Bruce Durant here and Deputy Brian Alfaro here. They'll be trying and preparing this case with me. When that will be, we don't know, but we hope to hear from Judge Newman sometime soon as to when we can expect that.
Scarlett, any specific challenges you think in prosecuting this as you go forward?
Well, I don't want to discuss the facts of this case and trial strategy and things like that. We're going to be focused on getting all admissible evidence before the judge and jury and pursuing this case vigorously.
Will you be concerned about being able to assemble a jury in this area?
You know, certainly this case has gotten a lot of publicity, but the issue is not whether or not someone has heard about this case. The issue is whether or not they can put everything they've heard aside and make a decision based on the facts and the evidence that are presented in court. And usually people want to do that, and you'd be surprised how many people don't have a problem coming forward and telling us, look, I can't be fair, I don't want to sit on this case. So I feel sure the people of Charleston County can decide it.
Was the case presented to the grand jury today, or did they return it today? I mean,
It was presented today.
And so they did this within an hour or so, or whatever?
I'm not sure exactly how long it took.
But it was all handled today?
It was all handled today.
There's been some call for you to recuse yourself from prosecuting this case. How do you respond to that? And
Well, as you know, I've already responded to that, and I have no intentions of conflicting this case out. I don't have a conflict in the case. And I think the people of the Ninth Circuit elected me to be accountable to them. And that's what we intend to do. They need to know that they have someone prosecuting this case and any other case that we can legally prosecute who's accountable to them and who's here to answer when the case is over, not to pack up and go home somewhere else, never to be seen or heard from again by the people here. So in any case where we can feasibly and ethically move forward, we're going to be the ones to do it, and it's no different in this case.
Explain how much having that video impacts your ability to present something like this to a grand jury and just your abilities to bring these charges so quickly.
Well, again, I don't want to get into the specific facts of this case, but in any case, more is better when you have more evidence, and it closes up the ability for questions to arise. It doesn't mean just because you have video in a case doesn't mean it's the be-all, end-all and the case is over. You think about all the bank robberies and armed robberies we have that we have video in all the time. But certainly, as a prosecutor, if we can have a case that depicts the crime and we aren't having to rely just on people's perceptions, the jury will be able to make up their own mind after seeing the video and hearing other testimony.
How strong is your case?
Well, I mean, the grand jury's indicted the case, and frankly, we have just received the case here in my office recently. So for me to assess the strengths of it would be a little premature, and I don't really think is my place to do to the media right now. Again, what our goal is to assemble all the evidence that we have that is admissible, to get it to the jury, and convince the jury as to why Mr. Slager has committed a crime. And that's what we'll do.
Generally speaking, is it especially difficult to prove murder in the case of an officer? I mean, I know you don't want to comment on this particular case strategy, but what kind of obstacles do you face when it's an officer involved?
I don't know that it's any more or less difficult. We try some pretty tough cases in the Ninth Circuit, and it really just depends on the quality of your evidence. And, you know, tying back into the question that was just asked, the strength of a case today is not necessarily the strength of a case a year from now. A lot of times cases get a lot better by the time we go to trial. Sometimes they get worse. So that's why it's difficult for anyone to predict how any given case is going to go, whether it's here or anywhere else in the country.
Do you know where SLED is in its investigation right now, and do you know when to expect a file from them?
I just received their file.
You just got it.
Yeah. They had given me some information last week that helped us in preparing the indictment for this week, but I received the rest of it this morning, and again, we'll be reviewing that, providing that to the defense as soon as possible.
How do you think they have done in investigating this, all angles of this case?
Again, I just got their file this morning, so I
So you
can't
have
tell
it.
you exactly how they've done. And again, how SLED's done is not necessarily the issue. What the issue is the people who were there, who were involved, who saw or heard anything, how they can testify and demonstrate to a jury what they saw and what happened. So that's the most important thing to us.
In all the cases that you have sort of been that police related to, do you feel comfortable in all those cases that you have never indicted an officer for killing a black man?
I feel comfortable that when SLED brings me a file and I review it and I make a decision, that I make a decision that is fair and just based on the evidence that's brought to me. As you know, we are not an investigative body. We take what law enforcement brings to us, assess it, and determine whether or not we have enough to go forward. When we have enough to go forward, we go forward. When we don't have enough to go forward, we don't go forward. And yes, I feel comfortable prosecuting this case, and I feel comfortable about the decisions that I've made in other cases.
Well, the Prosecutor brought out a lot of documentary on a lot of police shootings in the past week that led my organization to believe that it's in question on some of the cases that you handle.
Is that a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what is your question?
The question is, some of the cases that the Prosecutor brought out in the documentary, is in question, would you look at those cases again?
Sure, I would look at any new evidence we have in a case at any time. I don't have any new evidence that's been brought before me, so I don't have any current plans to review any other cases, but certainly if we had new or additional evidence, we'd be happy to take a look at it in this case or any other case that we have not prosecuted.
And Ms., based on the remarks that you made just now about questions not being, going unanswered at the end of your prosecution of cases, and you're saying that in this case it's your responsibility, of course, like all of it, to make sure that there aren't any questions on the table at the end. Well, within the African American community, in the cases of Darrell Drayton and in the case of Denzel Cornell, there were still questions left on the table. Why is it that we're supposed to believe that in the case of the Walter Scott shooting, that and Michael Slager, that there aren't going to be any questions left within the community?
I think you are misrepresenting what I've said. I didn't say that there wouldn't be any questions unanswered. In every case that we have, whether an officer is involved or whether a regular citizen is involved, we can't always answer every question because oftentimes we don't have eyewitnesses and oftentimes we don't have independent evidence. So there can always be a question that someone would have. What I'm saying is that in South Carolina and in the Ninth Circuit in particular, what we do is we take the evidence that's brought to us by law enforcement. I do not run law enforcement. I do not direct law enforcement. I take what they give us. If I have questions, I can ask them to follow up. But we take what we're given and we make a determination whether or not we're going to directly indict. In most situations and with most agencies, law enforcement will actually make the decision before we're involved as to whether or not to charge someone. SLED doesn't always operate that way. Sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. As many of you know who've covered this area, while I have not prosecuted an officer for murder under these types of circumstances, we certainly have prosecuted officers and approved warrants or at least consulted on warrants where we thought officers should be charged. And I'm confident, again, based on the evidence that has been brought before us, that we've made the proper decisions in other cases regarding whether or not to move forward. But here today we're talking about the Slager case, and as I mentioned before, there was one indictment presented. We're going to be the second set of eyes to look over the SLED investigative file, and from there we'll determine if there are any other charges. From what the officers, the SLED agents are telling me now, they have not seen probable cause to charge anyone else or to bring other charges, but we're going to look again at those and make a determination independently.
Do you know if the grand jury saw the cell phone video?
I was not in there. I do believe that the agents had it. I don't know for sure whether or not it was shown, but I know that they had it. We're going to wrap it up. I'm going to leave you with copies of the indictment. Again, I think there should be enough. If anybody doesn't have one, if y'all could just let us know and we'll get you a copy. All right? Thank you.
What
We're
do
done.
you have to say to
Thank
Walter
you.
Scott's family? Anything?
Ninth Circuit Solicitor Scarlett Wilson announcing moments ago an indictment handed down by the grand jury against Michael Slager, the now former North Charleston police officer accused of murder in the shooting death of Walter Scott back on April 4th. Those charges first announced just 3 days later by North Charleston Mayor Keith Summey when he said, "When you do wrong, you admit wrong." And that is where we stand right now with an indictment handed down. Solicitor Wilson saying that they will now wait on a court date, which she expects to hear something from Judge Newman in short order. She's saying that she felt like the facts presented by SLED warranted prosecution. That is why she went ahead with pushing for the indictment. All of this happening very quickly this morning with the facts being presented by SLED agents to that grand jury almost immediately handing down a successful indictment. We're going to be hearing from Walter Scott's family in a press conference coming up later on here on News 2 that we will bring you live on the air and online at counton2.com.